So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Blackberry Farm Golf Course Future Use Options Community Meeting. My name is Alicia Fennell, and I'm supporting the City of Cupertino with the outreach and engagement efforts in this project. Tonight's meeting will consist of a 20 to 30-minute presentation on the two options being considered and a Q&A session with the meeting ending at 8 p.m. Next slide, please. I'll start us off with a few introductions. You'll be hearing mainly tonight from Lisa Camelli, who is managing this project with the City of Cupertino. Also from the city, we have Susan Michael, Capital Improvement Program Manager, Jenny Coverman, Recreation Supervisor, and Branton Kurt, Community Outreach Specialist. We are also joined tonight by Taylor Peterson and Jeff Danner, who work with MIG and NGF consulting firms and worked on the feasibility studies for options A and B, which you'll learn a lot more about shortly. And again, my name is Alicia Fennell with Cascadia Consulting, and I'm supporting community engagement. Next slide, please. I know that many of us are all far too familiar with the logistics of online meetings these days, but before we dive in, we will briefly orient you to some of the key features of this Zoom webinar. So at the end of the presentation, as I mentioned, we'll have a Q&A session where you can ask verbal or written questions. If you'd like to ask a question verbally during the Q&A session, you will click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and you'll be able to unmute yourself once you are called on. At that point, you will have 2 minutes to speak, and we will be keeping time to make sure that we get through as many questions tonight as possible. If at any point during the presentation or during the meeting you would like to ask a written question, you can type it into the Q&A box, which is next to the raise hand icon. And at this point, I will pass it over to Lisa to dive into the two options being discussed tonight.
Great, thank you, Alicia. My name is Lisa Camelli, and I'm the project manager in the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program. And tonight we'll be discussing the two feasibility studies conducted for the future use of Blackberry Farm Golf Course. We're also glad to try to answer any questions you have about these studies. I'd like to give you an overview of this presentation. First, I'll be providing you some background on the site and its operation. Then I'll discuss current issues at the golf course that are compelling the city to look more closely at how the site is used and what actions the city has taken to date. Next, I'll discuss how this project fits within the context of the 2020 Parks and Recreation System Master Plan. Then I'll walk you through some of the detail of each option. Option A includes needed repairs and minor improvements to the existing golf course. Option B converts the golf course to natural habitat. After I present some detail on these options, we'll look at a comparative cost between the two options. Finally, we'd like to give you more information regarding the next steps on the project. So, next slide. This is a site map of the golf course and the surrounding area. In this view, north is to the right and Stevens Creek Boulevard is to the far right on the screen. Stevens Creek is the blue line above. Blackberry Farm Pool and associated parking lot is located south of the golf course. The golf course is within the yellow boundary. The entire site is about 16 acres and about 12.5 of those acres are irrigated. To the north is the existing golf course parking lot, which is adjacent to the main building. The main building houses the pro shop, the Blue Pheasant restaurant, and restrooms. Hole number 1 is immediately adjacent to the main building, and the course meanders through the site. And hole number 9 is located parallel to hole number 1. The green for hole number 9 is very near the golf course parking lot. Additionally, the historic pond area is the large brown patch on the course. Next slide. The course was built in 1962 and the city took on ownership and operation in 1991. Historically, the course was irrigated using well water in a storage tank. But in 2003, the storage tank failed and the irrigation system was converted to using municipal potable water. Currently, the city uses only municipal water for irrigation. The average annual cost for water is currently $63,000. Next slide. The golf course is immediately adjacent to Stevens Creek. The Stevens Creek corridor is home to protected wildlife and special status plants. The golf course is also within a designated floodplain. The last known flooding was in the last 10 years, and the historic ponds do not retain water. In terms of use of the golf course prior to COVID, the course was seeing about 28,000 rounds of golf annually, and the annual average subsidy to the golf course from the city was approximately $272,000. Next slide. There are two primary issues that raise concerns about the condition of the golf course. The irrigation system is over 60 years old. There are frequent failures of the main and lateral pipes. This can be very costly and waste valuable water. So the system is long past its useful life and it's very inefficient by today's standards. Additionally, drought-related water restrictions will likely impact the use of the system in the future. The long-term future cost of water is unpredictable, but expected to increase. Also, safety is another concern for the site. These safety issues relate to accessibility and errant balls on the course. Next slide. To address some of these issues, the city has taken several actions. In 2011, the city had a preliminary design completed to replace the existing irrigation system, but the work was not completed. In 2012, the city investigated rehabilitation of the existing well for irrigation. Then from 2014 to 2016, the city engaged NGF consultants to look at several options for renovations of the golf course. No options were implemented and work associated with the golf course was put on hold. In 2017, the city turned its focus to completing the Parks and Recreation System Master Plan. The master plan was adopted in 2020. After adoption of the master plan, the city was able to reinitiate discussions about use of the golf course. On July 20, 2021, City Council directed staff to look into two alternative uses of the site. This action initiated the two studies that we're discussing this evening. Next slide. Option A provides for necessary repairs and minor improvements of the golf course. Option B discontinues use of the site as a golf course and converts it to natural habitat. Next slide. The Parks and Recreation System Master Plan was adopted in 2020. As a guiding document for citywide park planning, we're compelled to ask how the project fits within the context of the master plan. The master plan advises that before doing like-for-like replacement of an amenity, we evaluate the benefits. Also, that we review current needs prior to replacing failing amenities. Additionally, the master plan specifically articulates the goal of increasing ecological value along Stevens Creek corridor. Next slide. In 2017, as part of the public outreach process for the master plan, the city conducted a citywide survey. There were 939 respondents, and based on the survey results, nearly 17% of respondents participate in golf. 67% stated that they walk for pleasure or fitness in nature. 83% noted that improving access to natural open space is important. 80% favored adding trails and pathways to existing inventory. And 74% stating that having a variety of recreational opportunities is important. Next slide. Now we'll look a little more at what is being proposed within each option. Option A includes necessary repairs and minor improvements to the existing golf course. This study was completed by the National Golf Foundation. Next slide. The study contains 4 primary elements. These include the replacement of the tees, greens, and the empty ponds. It addresses the primary golf course safety issues. It assesses the feasibility of restoring the existing well for irrigation, and it looks at replacement of the irrigation system. Next slide. By replacing tees and greens, the intention is to improve playability and drainage. It may also provide an opportunity to marginally expand the footprint of some tees and greens that are undersized given the amount of use the course sees. Also, reconstructing tees and greens during renovation and installation of the irrigation system is the best use of downtime for the course. Additionally, the empty ponds would be planted with native lowland species and remain empty. Next slide. The primary safety issues for the course include the need to shorten hole 9 because errant balls currently go into the parking lot and can be dangerous for unsuspecting patrons. Also, there are locations on the course that could be leveled to help with accessibility and prevent people from slipping on steeper slopes. Netting between holes number 4 and number 6 is needed to prevent errant balls from hole number 4 hitting a person teeing off at hole number 6. Additionally, the study looked at the historical well for irrigation of the golf course. The study found that costs associated with use of the well includes over $900,000 for improvements, as well as ongoing use fees, O&M costs, and consistent monitoring of Stevens Creek. Due to costs and potential impacts to Stevens Creek, this option was deemed not feasible. Next slide. The next important item in this study is the replacement of the irrigation system. This would include replacement of all elements of the system up to the existing water meter. The goals are to make the irrigation system much more efficient and effective. This will help reduce costs as well as provide options for future water use restrictions. Also, replacing this system will limit the potential for catastrophic break of the existing main line. Next slide. Now I'd like to look at the historic use of water for the site. This table indicates water use from 2008 to 2013, and then from 2014 to 2021. As you can see, there's a considerable reduction in water use after 2014. On average, after 2014, the city used only 53% of the water used prior to 2014. Given the condition of the existing irrigation system, this is an incredible reduction in use. In 2014, a few things propelled the reduction in water used. First, county-wide water use restrictions were implemented. Additionally, the city installed higher efficiency control system for irrigation heads. Also, there was a considerable reduction in total acreage being irrigated. We don't have specific information on the operational reductions, but we do know that periodically nearly 1/3 of the sprinkler heads are turned off, and this tends to leave large areas of the course brown during the summer season. Next slide. With a new irrigation system, and NGF is projecting water use as indicated in this table. If you focus on the areas circled in red, you can see how a new system can help reduce water use while still providing excellent efficiency and effectiveness. On the far left is the total acres being irrigated. We can irrigate more area with less water for better turf quality, or we can target areas to limit irrigation during water use restrictions. If we use a current baseline of 8.5 million gallons for future irrigation, we can supply about 12 acres with adequate irrigation year-round. In times of further water use restrictions, we can easily limit the acreage being irrigated. If we irrigate 9.5 acres of turf, the city can save approximately 21% over the current average. Next slide. Some of the benefits of option A include the ability to continue to use the site as a golf course. The irrigation system needs replacement and it is past its useful life. Additionally, an improvement to the irrigation, it would improve irrigation efficiency and effectiveness. It would improve safety and accessibility elements on the course. And residents could continue to use it as a unique type of recreation. Also, the plans would expand or improve upon the existing practice areas. Next slide. This slide shows a summary of costs over a 25-year period for option A. The initial capital costs are estimated to be $1.97 million. The projected 25-year operations and maintenance costs are estimated at $8.12 million. And that leaves us with a total cost over 25 years of $10.09 million. These costs are in 2022 dollars and are not adjusted for inflation, and they do account for projected revenues. Next slide. Now we'll look at option B, converting the golf course to natural habitat. Next slide. The study for option B was conducted by MIG. It looks at converting the entire golf course to a native oak savanna. This concept allows for extension of the wildlife corridor and an increase in ecological value. The primary elements of this option include the expansion of the riparian zone along the creek, bioswale planting of the empty ponds, the establishment of habitat islands for planting oak trees and other native plants to attract wildlife, and the establishment of wildflower meadows. Also, it's important to note that the existing woodlands would remain on site. The plan would also include trails and amenities for public enjoyment. As a final element, the plan includes the addition of 30 to 40 parking spaces to the southerly parking lot. Next slide. Some of the benefits of option B include the ability to integrate natural landscapes into the urban environment. The irrigation demand is less than 10% of that used for the golf course. It offers environmental education opportunities and allows for a strong connection with nature within an urban setting. Also, it will provide essential habitat patches and corridors to ensure the survival of native species in the area. Next slide. This is a concept plan for the conversion to natural habitat. To be clear, this is only a concept and is meant to show you one option for restoration. It includes habitat islands, which are the small green circles dispersed throughout the site. Riparian restoration measures indicated by the long, narrow orange strip along Stevens Creek. Planting of a bioswale indicated by the narrow yellow strip in the location of the historic ponds. Wildflower meadows indicated by the yellow patches on the plan. And then approximately 4,500 linear feet of walking trails indicated by the white lines on the plan. Next slide. These photos help provide some context for a conversion of the golf course. On the left, you can see the existing golf course. On the right, you can see an example of an oak woodland, including trails. Next slide. On the right is a sample. On the left, you can see the existing golf course. On the right is an example of a not yet mature native habitat island I believe this is at McClellan Ranch also. Next slide. Here on the left is an example of a mature wildflower meadow. On the right is a photo of what a typical mature habitat island might look like. Next slide. This slide provides a summary of total cost over a 25-year period for conversion of the golf course to natural habitat. The initial capital costs are estimated at $1.88 million. The projected 25-year operations and maintenance costs are estimated at $10.22 million, and the total cost is estimated at $12.1 million. Again, these are 2022 dollars and not adjusted for inflation. Next slide. Now I'd like to show you a cost comparison between the two options. Next slide. This table provides a summary of the 25-year cost for each option. Additionally, it provides an estimate for the total amount of water used for each option. The key takeaways from this table include the following. The difference in total cost, project cost, is just over $2 million, with costs higher for restoration to natural habitat. The average annual O&M cost difference between the two options is approximately $79,000, with higher costs associated with the restoration to natural habitat. But restoration of natural habitat will use less than 10% of the water needed for the golf course. One other consideration as well as we view this table is that water use costs will likely continue to rise at levels above the consumer price index. This may narrow cost differences over time. Next slide. Now that we have a sense of what these options include and what the approximate costs will be, we'll talk about next steps and how you can share your opinions. I'm going to pass it back to Alicia to provide you with more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So community engagement is a huge piece of this process because community input on these two options will inform the recommendations that the city brings forward to council in October or November of this year. Currently, the city's public outreach plan for this project includes the elements and events laid out on this slide. The Engage Cupertino website is ongoing and houses all of the information related to this project. In May, there was a citywide distribution of informational postcards, which most likely many of you received in the last couple of weeks. On May 25th, our online survey was launched. Today, June 6th, we have this virtual community meeting. On June 11th and July 11th, we have open house events at Blackberry Farm Golf Course. On July 7th, there will be a pop-up event at the Summer Concert Series at Memorial Park. And on July 15th, the survey will close. Next slide, please. After these outreach and engagement events, there are a few final steps in this process. In July and August, we will analyze the survey results and other public input we received during this process. We will then take those results to the Bike Pedestrian Commission and the Sustainability Commission in August and September and hear recommendations from them. We'll do the same with the Parks and Recreation Commission in September or October. And finally, we'll present the recommendations from those three commissions and the survey and public engagement results to City Council in October or November and seek Council's recommendations. Next slide, please. Now that you've heard a lot more detail about what these two options entail, we really want to hear your feedback and opinions related to the future use of the Blackberry Farm Golf Course. So the reports and all the information about this project and the two options live on the Engage Cupertino website, which you can see a link for here on this slide. And from that website, you can subscribe to receive project updates, and you can take the online survey. And additionally, we really encourage you to share that survey as widely as possible with your Cupertino community, because we want to make sure that we hear from as many residents as possible during this process. We'd also love to see you in person at the open house events or the pop-up event coming up this month and next. Next slide, please. With that, we will begin our transition from this presentation to our Q&A session, which will go until 8 p.m. So as a reminder, you can type your question into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or you can click the raise hand icon if you'd like to ask your question verbally. We'll start with the questions written in the Q&A chat, and then we'll move on to calling on people with raised hands. And again, as another reminder, folks will have about 2 minutes to ask their question. Thank you all so much for your attention, and we look forward to this Q&A session.
Great, thank you, Alicia. So I'll start off with the questions that are in writing here. First question we have is, the annual costs are just $63,000. My small home watering costs about $2,500 per year. Does the city get a lower water water? No, the water rates are based on the type of use. So there are different water use rates because this is irrigation. The water provider charges the water at a different rate than residential rates. So that is, we can get you more information associated with that, but just to be clear, they are assessed at different rates. So. And then the next question we have is, what is a habitat island? And I'm going to hand that over to Tay Peterson, who is with MIG, who has a much better sense of it than I do.
Somehow I thought you were going to. A habitat island is an area that is planted with shrubs, herbs, or smaller plants, and a tree or two, probably in this case, to make kind of an island of a different type of habitat as you move through the park area. And it would be surrounded by more grassy areas, similar to a picture that Lisa showed on one of the slides. There are some habitat islands in McClellan Ranch that give you a sense of what this would be like. It gives an opportunity to provide additional plant species for pollinators and birds to nest in, and that it just adds variety to the surrounding parkland.
Thank you, Tay. Let's see, Carol Stanek says the potential for grant funding was not spoken to. Will you mention that? So there is a sense, at least at this point, based on available grants out there, that we would likely be able to secure grants for the return to natural habitat option. And Tay might have a little more information on that. I do believe that the water department has some grants available that are filtered down through different agencies. So Tay, do you want to address that?
There's a wide variety of grants available from different wildlife conservation groups. It just depends on what their requirements are. So that would need further research. I think you had an estimate of 300 or 600,000 potential.
Right. In our initial look at things, we thought we could probably get about $300,000 for the initial construction, and then another $300,000 over the 25 years of operation. So, but those costs are not integrated into the costs that you've seen tonight. Let's see. Is there reclaimed water line that could be used to irrigate? Unfortunately, there's no existing reclaimed water line anywhere near the site. That would be our first option also, if it was an option. So just if or when that happens, it will open up a lot of opportunity potentially, but there's no current plan to provide reclaimed water. Let's see, next question. What happens to the runoff on the golf course? Does it drain directly to into Stevens Creek? it probably depends on how much it's raining. Lighter rains, it would just absorb, I believe, into the existing soils, just like the irrigation does. I don't know that there's any, the site is, has a low enough grade that it would take significant rainfall for it to drain directly into Stevens Creek. My guess is that much of the rainfall that occurs currently, because there's a lot of sand used on the site, on the turf, much of it is probably permeates into the ground, but that would depend a little bit on how much rain you're getting at one time. So hopefully that answers your question. We describe what the open house means. Can non-golfers attend? Will people have to pay the golf fees? Will golf be played during the open house? So the open house is an opportunity for anyone who would like to walk through the site and get a sense for the site itself without golfers on site. So we are closing the golf course to golfing. You will not be charged any fee to attend the open house. We will be providing a little more information about the project and hopefully answering any questions you have, as well as doing a site walkthrough. So thank you. Is the existing parking lot part of the plan? If so, why is more parking needed? That's, I think that Jenny might have a little more information on the parking needs at Blackberry Farm in general. Jenny, do you have any answer associated with that?
Sorry about that. Yeah, so that's the parking lot at Blackberry Farm Pools and Picnic, not the parking lot at the golf course. We actually limit our picnic rental permits because of the amount of parking spaces we have. And so additional parking would greatly benefit how many people we can fit in our picnic area and actually get closer to capacity. So if we were to return it to nature, the plan would be to add an additional row of parking to hopefully address that need.
Great, thank you, Jenny. This next question might also be for you. Wondering if anyone knows how Deep Cliff Golf Course obtains its water supply. I am not certain of that.
I don't know that answer to that question.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, who will maintain the natural habitat, city workers or outside contractors? So the cost estimates put together for the natural habitat option include hiring contractors to plant and maintain the habitat or the plant life for up to the first 8 years of operation. After that 8-year period, we would have our public works grounds folks take over operations and maintenance of the site. So we would ensure that the goal in that first 5 to 8 years is to ensure we have good establishment and healthy plants that can be more readily and easily maintained by our grounds folks. Let's see, next question says, the big study and community input in 2014 had 3 options for the golf course. The community expressed a desire for the minimum change to the golf course, not to return to nature. Why was that not acted on? And why are we going through the same process again? I have a little background on that. Jenny might have a little more background on that. I believe in 2015 or 16, when these 3 options were presented to council, there were a couple different opinions, and the concept of return to natural habitat came in at a few of the council meetings and likely at a few of the commission meetings. And so I think that was sort of the beginning of that conversation, or the beginning of the conversation in earnest. I'm sure.
Lisa.
Yeah.
So yes, at the time that it was part of the master plan for the corridor, and there were a few options for the golf course. Return to habitat was not one of them. It was a shortening, there were a few different options for the golf course. And at the time, council decided to wait until the Parks and Recreation Master Plan was completed, which we completed 2 years ago. And so by deferring that, we now had to update the number. Now coming back to it, we had to update the numbers on the golf course plans, and we added in a return to nature, because at the time there were many people that spoke out in public saying there is no option to return to nature. Why don't we have that? And a few council members had expressed that desire too. So when we came back with the plan this time, we added in that option. And that's why we're not really revisiting the exact same thing, but we are coming back to it because it was deferred because of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
Thank you, Jenny. There are two other questions that you might have more information on. The first question is 28,000 rounds per year. How many are Cupertino residents?
Those are about 39% are Cupertino residents.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And I don't know that there's been an estimate, but it says, what is the estimated usage by Cupertino residents for option B? I'm not sure that we don't have a projection for that, but I don't know if you have anything associated with that on McClellan.
Yeah, we do kind of for the corridor. The rangers do keep a tally of approximately how many people they do see on the trails on every day that they work. And so when we came with this a year ago, we had over 50,000 people on the trail annually. We feel is a ballpark for that.
Great, great. And a sense of Cupertino residents?
No way to know.
Yeah, exactly. Next question is, will this area connect to the Stevens Creek corridor, which will link Cupertino and Shoreline, provide bike routes, etc.? So yes, this new area would connect to the Stevens Creek corridor within the area itself. Let's see, next question or comment is, South Bay is a major flyway for migratory birds. Golf courses don't seem to be a positive way to protect migrations that have occurred for eons. Memorial Park ponds used to be used by migrating geese. It's an eyesore and no alternative water features have been provided. I would like a natural habitat for our city. That's a comment. Thank you. Next comment is, given the community's interest in a variety of recreational options, would it be wise to eliminate one of the two community golf courses when 1 in 5 residents plays golf? Deep Cliff is more difficult to play for seniors and young golfers, and tee times are more difficult to schedule as well. It also is more expensive for people of limited means like seniors and teachers. That's me. So that. Let's see. Someone gives a comment that says truck in reclaimed water. That could be difficult to do. Additional questions are, how many people take advantage of golf course annually? As we mentioned earlier, it's the annual use is about 28,000 rounds. We don't know how many people. We know how many rounds. I don't know if we have unique users yet, Jenny. So no information on that.
No, we don't.
And as she mentioned earlier, about 39% are Cupertino residents. I think we've answered those other questions there. So what are the soil infiltration rates of the golf course? If they're moderate or high, what measures are being taken or proposed to limit infiltration of pollutants used to maintain the golf course? Relatedly, does infiltration measurably interact with groundwater levels or rates of flow on Stevens Creek? I don't know that there's been the kind of study that's needed to give you exact answers. I do know that the current fertilizer and pesticide use on the course, there are reports provided to the city associated with that. And I do know that the the company that maintains the golf course for us uses the minimum required. So that much I can tell you. Next question is, with the existing severe drought and climate change, I consider a golf course a total waste of precious resources. That's a comment. How long might the golf course need to be closed for repairs? We've estimated up to 12 months for the full repairs and replacement of the irrigation system and the tees and greens. So. Will you also post recording of this presentation on the project webpage? I don't know if maybe Branton can answer that question. I don't know that we post this presentation.
We can post this. Yeah, we actually gave a very similar presentation to the Parks and Rec Commission, and that information is also posted. So we can easily post this to the Engage Cupertino website afterwards.
Also, we can also post it to the city's YouTube page.
Great, thank you. Next question is, why isn't the Stockelmeyer property included in this project? Well, that, Jenny, you might have more information on that.
I can answer
Susan?
that. I think when the study for the golf course was undertaken, it was in itself contained as a golf course, and there are other properties around. The Blue Pheasant is one of the properties, the Stockelmeyer residence, and we wanted to answer the question of the golf course or habitat rather than add in other variables to muddy the works, as you will. So we kept it straightforward. It's this or that, and then once we make a decision, if it's appropriate to alter the scope accordingly, we will, but we'll take that up, of course, at another time. So we wanted to keep the question or the dynamic or the options for the public simple at this point.
Thank you, Susan. The next question, it just says the trail, there's a trail adjacent to the golf course currently. Was this considered? And the property adjacent is Blackberry Farms. I think the question or the comment has to do with the duplicity of having two sets of trails on each side of of Stevens Creek and the need for that. So it was more of a comment, I think. So another comment says, just put in a well. That is an option, but we still face the same obstacles of the cost of the well, as well as ongoing maintenance and operation of the well. So what does floodplain mean, and how does the golf course work into that? So the U.S. Corps of Army Engineers has a nationwide floodplain map that maps out what they call the 100-year event, and which basically translates to the 1% chance of flooding in an area. This most of the golf course does currently sit within the 100-year floodplain, aside from the area that goes uphill on the site. So hopefully that answered your question. There's a link to a YouTube that I'm probably not going to click right now. How does the answer given to the planting and maintenance 8 years contract compare with what was done for McClellan Ranch natural area? Tay, were you part of the McClellan Ranch work?
No, I would have to do some research on that question. We were part of the design, but not the installation.
Right. Jenny, do you have any further information on that?
I'm sorry, I was answering somebody.
Oh, no problem. The question was, how does the answer given the planting and maintenance, the 8-year contract, compare to what was done at McClellan Ranch?
I'm not exactly sure, actually.
Okay.
So
If I-
we
Go ahead.
came up with
Kelly.
that 8 years because of consultation with contractors that install these and maintain them.
Great. Thank you.
I'll
Tay.
also add that the design for the natural habitat is not a foregone conclusion. It's something that MIG and Parks and Rec and our project team in full came up with. seemed appropriate for the area. But if we go the route of the natural habitat, the design will be further developed and actually we'll get input as to what's appropriate, what's feasible for the site.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Apologies, I'm losing my voice right now, so.
Perfect.
And I just wanted it to be clear too, that that does connect. It sounded like a question earlier may have been regarding the current corridor trail versus this one, that they aren't separate, that they would connect. And so it's really kind of adding a loop to that trail and making that a little bit longer. So it's not a separate trail with that big netting down the parking lot. The netting would be gone and it would be one big area.
Right, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. So next question is, will the Blue Pheasant restaurant and bar be shut down? There is no plan in this project to address any issues with the Blue Pheasant restaurant, and there's no plan for it to be shut down to my knowledge. So do you have anything to add to that, Jenny? Thank you. Another comment here, I might add that when there was water in the pond back in the day, we did have geese and ducks and egrets and hawks. That may be true. I believe that the pond, actually, my understanding is that the pond was fed by the well as a direct connection from the stream into the ponds, which is how the ponds stayed full when they were in use. So they were actually, it was consistently being fed by the stream. And then over time, and with additional environmental regulations, I believe that that discontinued. So you're aware. Would natural habitat option make improvements to the Stevens Creek corridor and stillhead habitat? Tay might be able to address this. The broad answer is that would be the goal. But Tay, if you want to add to that, feel free.
So yes, it would broaden the natural habitat. It would broaden areas for wildlife. The steelhead are, of course, confined to the creek. So in the regard where it might provide more shading to the creek's pretty well taken care of with the existing riparian corridor, but it'll widen it.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. Did the feasibility study suggest an increase in rounds played if the course is renovated, improved? So it didn't imply the increase in rounds. That would probably require increase in marketing, maybe some additional improvements or variation in operation. But the study itself did not address increasing the number of rounds. Jenny, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's accurate.
Thank you. The Blackberry Farm Golf Course closes, let's see, I'm reading this here. If Blackberry Farm closes, can Deep Cliff absorb the extra volume of golfers, or will the only option be the use of expensive private courses, which will be difficult for youth and non-wealthy residents? I don't have information on that, Jenny.
No, yeah, I think there's just no way to know how many people would then want to play Deep Cliff. Deep Cliff is a very different course, and as people have said, it takes longer to play, it's more expensive, and I just don't know how many people would actually, if they're not choosing Deep Cliff now versus Blackberry Farm, then I don't know that they would specifically go there. So there's just no way to know how many people would go on to Deep Cliff.
Right, thank you. Next question was, you mentioned this would connect with Stevens Creek corridor. Can you describe where and how? And essentially, because there's not a plan in place, I can't tell you where and how. We do know that we would incorporate connections to the existing trail, but that would be part of the next phase of this project. So hopefully that answered your question. You mentioned connection to Stevens Creek Trail. To connect with trail in Sunnyvale and Mountain View, the trail would need to go through the area on the other side of Stevens Creek and has nothing to do with the golf course. Please keep the golf course. That is a comment. Thank you. Stocklemire is already a nature area and should be part of this plan. I think Susan tried to articulate the reasons for that. So hopefully you understood those reasons. Sorry, it was Deep Clip that just put in a well in the answer to your question. I guess it is cost effective. So it sounds like Deep Cliff may have just put in a well. So I am uncertain of that, as is Jenny, I believe. How do the maintenance costs of the golf course compare with other parks and recreation fields in Cupertino?
Do you want me to
Jenny,
answer that one?
if you have an answer, because I do not.
Well, when we did our field use study, it's well over $1 million to maintain all the other fields in Cupertino. And that's not including all of our parks, but that includes all of our full-time staff and everything that comes with that. The maintenance of the golf course is currently a $205,000 contract a year for professional turf management. We are in the process of going out for an RFP that just opened last week for the for maintenance of the golf course. So it is significantly cheaper for that one facility, but to compare that one to others, we don't have that exactly.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. The last question I have here, or comment, I think the question of continuing the operation of the Blue Pheasant came up because the map showing option B shows the existing building becoming the ranger office. So the proposal actually is not to convert the entire building to the ranger office. We would convert the pro shop to a ranger office. So we would continue to provide the restrooms to the public and convert the pro shop to a ranger's office, and the Blue Pheasant would continue to operate. So hopefully that makes sense. So those are all the questions I currently have. I gotta thank you. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. So we'll go ahead and transition over to the verbal Q&A, but you can absolutely keep adding your questions to the Q&A chat. And as time allows, we can circle back to the Q&A box. So when you're called on, you should see a notification come up on your screen that allows you to unmute yourself and ask your question. And again, we will keep those to 2 minutes, and you'll receive a 15-second warning when you're coming up on your 2 minutes. So with that, the first hand I see raised is Kent. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I happen to be a person who uses Blackberry, Deep Cliff. I spend a lot of time in the Blackberry Park area. I ride through there every single week. I also play golf in San Jose, and I'm wondering if the city of Cupertino has consulted with the city of San Jose. Their city course, which is called Los Lagos, uses nothing but recycled water, and they made the investment, and they have the most beautiful golf course, I think, in the South Bay. I mean, it is just absolutely manicured. It's beautiful, and because they use recycled water, so they don't have to worry about what you guys are talking about with the golf course. So that would be question number one. And then I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I go through the native savanna area of the existing park, and I hardly ever see anybody on it. And it's marked. The trees are marked. You've got bird habitats and things back there, and it's just not being used. Everybody seems to stay on the pavement. And my kind of thought is that most everybody who goes to Blackberry Park are locals who can walk there. Most people do not drive there, and I'm just concerned that if we were to put in a native habitat at the Blackberry golf course, that it wouldn't be used except for by the people who can just basically walk there. Anybody that gets into a car that's going to be going to a natural habitat is just going to go a little bit further down the road and go to Rancho San Antonio, which is thousands and thousands of acres of oak savanna. You get lots of trails, hills, flats, even have a farm out there to take the kids to. So I'm really concerned about the use. And if you take away the golf course, you're taking away something that is year round.
15 seconds.
And that particular course is excellent for beginners, kids, and it's inexpensive. And it's a way of getting kids into the way of golf, which is something they can use for the rest of their life. So that's my comment. Any answers to the city of San Jose?
I'm not aware of the city of San Jose's golf course operations.
It's definitely worth looking into, I mean, to learn more about, to see if there's anything there that we can appropriate for this golf course. So thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you. And next question will be from Lisa. So Lisa, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thank you. So I really appreciate Kent Vincent's comments and agree with them. And I would like to know the ranger station, that means an employee. Is the cost for that employee incorporated in the cost analysis, including all benefits for that employee? We talked about duplicity of trails. And Kent said what I was going to say about, we've got a trail there. If all you're doing is adding a loop, it seems like a huge waste when people can and will most likely go to Rancho San Antonio for longer trails anyway. And I had hoped to have the length of the trail described in miles as opposed to how it was described, because I couldn't translate in my head how long that is. But I just feel like we're gonna have a denser city. We're gonna have more bodies that want to do activities. We need a variety of activities. We have plenty of hiking trails, and I don't golf. I do hike. So I'm not pro golf because I'm a golfer. I just think you need to stick with a variety. 74% of almost 900 people, over 900 people, said that they wanted a variety of activities. And I'm a little insulted, actually, that this is being presented as one or the other without really room at this point to add other ideas that have already been spoken about for years. So I'm a little concerned about that.
15 seconds.
Okay, I think I probably should just stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So to go back to the few questions that you had, the cost for the rangers is accounted for in the 25-year operations and maintenance, including all benefits, et cetera. So that has been covered in the costs that you've seen. Additionally, that 4,500 linear feet of trail comes to a little over 3/4 of a mile of trail. So you're aware of that.
Thank you. All right, the next hand I see raised is John. So John, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
I'd just like to comment. I answered the question about the how Deep Cliff is watered. They put in a well some couple of years ago, and they pump wells into a lake and use that to do their watering, and it's been quite successful. So Blackberry Farm is a golf course that is demonstrably successful, and it's an asset to our city. It provides healthy, safe, and enjoyable exercise and is used by many in the community. It's special. We found that out in the 2014 Stevens Creek Corridor study, with multiple public meetings where the users of the golf course defended it tremendously and didn't want it rebuilt. They just wanted exactly what's being proposed now, just bring it up to snuff. And I think that the natural habitat was one of the options. I know you say it wasn't, but my memory, although it's getting worse, says it was. I have a reason I don't want to convert it to natural habitat, because if you're using, in your literature, you use the successful conversion of McClellan Ranch. I walk that every day, and I don't regard that as successful. We have got plants that just die all over the place. You just expanded the parking lot at McClellan Ranch, planted all the plants. 80% of them are dead. We just don't take care of things. I'm glad to see you're putting in an 8-year contract, but the results at McClellan Ranch are not pleasing to the eye, and I really don't think they're an enhancement to the city. Plus, as other people have said,
15 seconds.
so we need more trails. So I'm just really hope that the city will actually do something this time when the community says they want the golf course fixed up. We fixed up the picnic areas and the pool and everything else when we bought the place, but we didn't do anything on the golf course. So it's really time to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for those comments. And next, I see Teresa's hand raised. So Teresa, you should be able to unmute. Thank you.
My question is that Menlo Park, they have recycled water system, and they've been successful to build a recycle system to water the golf course. Why can we do the same? Thank you.
So I can try to take that question. Apologies. Currently, there is not a recycled water system anywhere near the existing Blackberry golf course. I'm not sure where the nearest recycled or tertiary water supply would be, but it would have to be provided somewhere near, even if it was within a quarter mile, it might be worth considering, but beyond that, it just becomes very cost prohibitive. So
I can say something about Menlo Park if you want.
sure.
That
Yes.
system was installed by West Bay Sanitary District because they needed to do something with their recycled water. So it was a different funding source,
Right. Thank you.
and it's quite extensive.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, next on our list is Peggy. Peggy, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for the information you've provided. I like seeing the costs and numbers. The golf course, golf in itself has always been considered a wealthy person's sport with expensive club memberships to play. You pay to play. And my concern is that common people who don't have these memberships, Blackberry Farm provides an opportunity for kids and families to learn to play golf without those requiring the expensive memberships. Is there, if Blackberry closes, what's the next best alternative for people who can't afford to be a member of a golf club? Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know, Jenny, if you want to add anything there.
If you're looking for something similar to Blackberry Farm, then you'd be looking for a 9-hole course that, is a public course, or is something like a Sunken Gardens in Sunnyvale, or you could go to Prune Ridge. Santa Teresa also has a small 9-hole course in the midst of their 18-hole. Those would probably be your closest options compared to Blackberry Farm. They're usually the courses that we compare ourselves to, mainly Sunken Gardens in Sunnyvale.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you. All right, Joetta, you can go ahead and unmute to ask your question. Joetta, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, yeah. So is there concern about fire safety? So I've heard that golf courses act as somewhat of a fire break versus, I know that in McClellan Ranch area, just every time I go through there, it just seems extremely dry and a lot of underbrush.
Right, thank you. Taylor, would you like to take this question?
Yes, part of the maintenance for the natural habitat would be a defensible space maintenance, and that was included in the cost estimates. So a lot of attention would be paid to keeping that a fire safe area.
Thank you, Tay.
Thank you. So at this point, I don't see any other hands raised. We have one just comment in the Q&A box, which I can go ahead and read now. And then I think there will be some more hands raised and comments coming in. One comment in the Q&A box right now is, living environment cannot be quantified and Stevens Creek Trail is enough. It is by the Blackberry Golf Course side. That is pretty. We live around this area and love our community. Please don't remove the golf course. Keep yellow in the water shortages seasons and enjoy it green in a rainy season, like our own lawn. We would not remove the lawn in a water shortage season. Thank you for that comment. And I'll go ahead and transition back since I see some more hands raised. The first hand I see raised is by someone named Guest. So if that's you, I've given you permission to ask your question now.
Hi, yes, I had a question. Going back to the Stevens Creek corridor, and this would be incorporated, but you don't have specifics yet. I would think that as a resident of this neighborhood that I would want specifics so I can make an informed decision. There has to be only certain options available to link to the Stevens Creek corridor, just given the nature of the streets and the geography. So can we be provided that, and what has been looked at in that regards?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question. Could you formulate that again, try again?
Yeah.
You want to know more about the natural habitat option in order to make a better informed decision?
I would like to know how this is going to be connected to the Stevens Creek corridor.
The area is a part of the Stevens Creek corridor, so it will by nature be connected. And it kind of goes back to the Stockelmeyer property question. I was thinking of the house, there is of course the orchard and other grounds that are related to that property. And especially if it's going to become a habitat option, then we'd have to take that into consideration, and we'd have to see what makes sense to develop that in at least adjacency. So it's definitely not something that we would we're only doing everything in this option, within this boundary. We aren't going to look at the impact to the surrounding areas. We'd have to, yeah.
Okay, and would the natural habitat connect to the Bay Trail then?
I'm not aware. Lisa, do you know?
I do not. It would connect to the existing Stevens Creek corridor trail. So.
Okay. Then my only comment would be, as a resident, I would like to keep the golf course because I think that just adding 3/4 mile of additional trail that goes in a loop and then taking away that open space is not something that I would like.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it.
I'll take the opportunity to reiterate that please, especially if you have opinions, strong opinions or mixed, please use the survey to give your insight into the project or to the studies there. Also, we will be having an upcoming, once the study closes, we will gather the information, compile a summary report, and our first step will be to go back to Parks and Rec Commission. And so definitely, if you register on the engagecupertino.org website, you can be notified of what's coming up, and watch for the Parks and Rec Commission meetings to know when the golf course options will be represented. And once we get a recommendation from Parks and Rec Commission, then we'll go back to council with the recommendation. So definitely, this is more of a fact gathering than a consensus taking, temperature taking session, but we definitely do want your input, and we encourage you to be vocal and engaged in what is happening in your city. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. All right, next hand raised is Marilyn. So Marilyn, you can go ahead and speak.
Hi there. I must be the lone voice here, but I actually am in favor of making the space a natural or native habitat. And I came up with a bunch of reasons, some related to people, others to nature specifically. First, I like to see the space more inclusive rather than available only to paid customers. Next, urban areas are stressful places, and studies show that simply looking at trees can reduce stress. And the more active we are, of course, the better. I guess in this case, walking or jogging in the trees. I think there could be ways to build community. I understand the golf course, that is a source of community for people. But in this case, maybe we could have regularly scheduled work days where volunteers could gather to plant plants or maybe to weed, to sort of help out in some way so they feel kind of more engaged with the space. Of course, I think you've already mentioned there could be programs for education, so people can, or kids or adults could learn about native plants and insects. Species like coast live oaks, which I think you've talked about adding, provide forage for wildlife, store carbon, filter air pollution, dull city noises, and block wind for people. Golf courses, as we know, require extra fertilizer and herbicides that are not, that don't support biodiversity and may, we don't know, harm the waterway that's right nearby. One more idea, planting native plants in city parks kind of normalizes them so that when people see these plants, maybe they'll consider putting them in their own yards. And I agree with other people who've commented that the area needs to be maintained. We can't just plant them and then just ignore it. And I agree with what other people have said about McClellan Ranch. And one more thing, studies show that birds are in serious decline, and climate change is affecting biodiversity across the food web, and naturalizing this area with native plants would give more food to our birds, because native plants host more caterpillars, and birds need caterpillars for feeding their young. Am I getting cut off? Anyways, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn, for sharing those thoughts and opinions. And again, I appreciate, Susan, that you had just reiterated that really making sure to visit the website and take the survey and share your opinion there is what we hope to see. So thank you for that, Marilyn. Up next, Kathy, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, thank you. I had several questions. One of them is, has anybody done a count on how many people using the golf course are seniors, or how many are families taking their children out to introduce them to golf? I play it very frequently, and that's usually the makeup of the course are seniors and families. And the other thing is, in keeping with the discussion about birds, there's a lot of woodpeckers out there, many western bluebirds. There's all bluebird boxes all over the place for their nesting. And there are hawks, and I've even seen a heron from one of the fairways over toward the creek. I've even seen a heron in there. So it certainly is a desirable place for birds that are breeding. But I'm curious to know about the makeup of the people who are using the golf course. Thank you.
I can take that, Lisa. I don't have the specific number in front of me, but we can definitely pull the information regarding people who are playing, who are over the age of 50, and then as well as the youth on the course. Exactly how many are families would be a little trickier, but we could definitely do children and what we consider senior at the golf course.
Thank you. All right, up next, we have Lisa. Lisa, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, so I've already spoken. If there's somebody else and you want to come back to me at the end.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, let's actually do that. And I was also going to give a reminder that we've got just about 14 minutes left in this session. And I would love to or really love to focus this time on questions. And then again, as we've shared, you can share your opinions through the survey and through the Engage Cupertino website. So let's try to focus on questions with these last, 14 or so minutes. So I appreciate that awareness. So thank you for that. So next hand raised on my list. I believe John and Kent have already spoken, so I'd love to jump down. I don't think we've heard yet from Phil, and we'll come back to folks with time. So Phil, you should be allowed to go ahead and unmute yourself and speak now. Thank you.
Hi, I'd like to just put in a good word for Blackberry Farm and the McClellan Ranch, because I walked down there a lot and I heard it knocked today. Somebody said it wasn't very good, but I think the city's done a fine job maintaining it. And they have the maintenance crew. I've watched them work. They do good work, and they're keeping it up. And I really like the place. It looks very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. All right, let's next go to Louise. Louise, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, terrific. I am a senior, and I also want to commend the city staff, the field staff, for how well they have maintained that whole Stevens Creek corridor, walking along the trail and seeing the natural plant life. It's so refreshing and healthy to be walking there. So kudos to the staff for the planning, arranging, making it available, and keeping it maintained so beautifully. It's so easy to criticize. It's so hard to create and maintain. So thank you to you. The question I have is, because I'm a senior and I have back problems, I really can't golf. And I see little kids on strollers on the trails, and seniors like myself and very able-bodied people sort of doing a semi-jog in the trails. And I feel like that really serves a big cross-section of the city with our health needs, our mental and physical health needs in this time of COVID and everything. But I feel like I feel like the golf course excludes the rest of the community from being able to utilize that space at a cost of a lot of water usage. And I don't think it really serves the whole range of little kids to people that have physical and mental issues. Because I think the nature trails can have benches and all sorts of things to accommodate people. So I'm just, I guess I'm just wanting to ask if the city is going to weigh the diversity that the golf course option versus the nature trail option, the diversity it serves, and the percentage of the population and the number of people. Because when I go walking on the Blackberry Trail, the Stevens Creek corridor as it is now, it's very crowded on the weekend, very crowded. So increasing the trails would be great. Okay.
Thank you, Louise, for that question. Susan or Jenny, do you want to address that?
I can. I think that, what was I going to say? That you asked if the diversity and the range of the type of abilities of the population would be accommodated, would be considered. Definitely, it will be considered. The question will be, what will be the compelling reasons for one option or the other? That is, we can make suggestions based on cost. We can make suggestions based on the public input that we've gotten. I think that we will, staff in a way is agnostic. We're looking at what are the objective truths as well as what's the community input. And those are the things that we're going to be presenting. So I think that's a really fantastic point. And I would just make sure that it's part of the opinions that we can pass on to the commission and the council.
Thank you. All right, up next, Samuel, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thanks. I mean, I get the impression that regarding the water supply, that the option that was looked at was rebuilding the existing old well. And I did not get the impression that an option for putting in a new well was fully considered. So, my question is, what is it going to take to get the Parks and Rec to go back and get a cost estimate really for putting in a new well in the same way that Deep Cliff has done? That's my question.
If I can answer that, I think. Thank you. I don't think I've heard much detail about what Deep Cliff has done, so that warrants a little bit more investigation. I will say that for the preliminary study that we've done at this point, actually, there has been a great deal of work that has been investigating whether or not the well is feasible. And I don't have the documentation at hand, but I will say it hasn't been it's not been as casual maybe as you might think, because we had to look into the fees, the environmental concerns, the logistics of how it would actually function, the impact on the habitat around its existing. So I'm not saying there's a black and white answer to your question, but I think it warrants that we look into what Deep Cliff has done to make sure that we understand that we haven't overlooked anything. But I think we have actually, this is one of the things that we consider quite well so far. And hopefully that would be in the study, which the studies are posted right now on the Engage Cupertino website, and you can have a look at that to see what the kind of objectives of understanding of that situation is.
Thank you. All right, up next, we will go to Jake. Jake, you can unmute yourself.
Hi. So me and my friends, we go to Blackberry Farm like all the time, like especially in the summer. So I was kind of wondering when the best case that the repairs to the golf course would be done, because like I go there all the time, and that's like where I learned to golf, and I love that golf course. So when is the best case that the repairs would be done?
Lisa, you talked to National Golf Foundation about that. I remember you said it would take about a year in whole to do the repairs, and there was an option to phase, do some holes at a time, but actually, we'll further consider that later if that's the path that we go down. The National Golf Foundation did say that the phasing wasn't the most efficient, wasn't the best. They wouldn't recommend it necessarily, but I don't think it's been ruled out either. So having said all that, a year doesn't mean that starting in one season or another has the benefits, at least at that high level. So the answer is, I don't know. We don't know yet, but we definitely know that summer is the time that people use the golf course the most. So we look to lessen that impact.
Thank you, Susan. All right, up next, Shirley, you can go ahead and ask your question.
I just want to say I really enjoy the park system in Cupertino, and I do go to McClellan Ranch Park, and I like all the offerings there. My grandson is 14, and he is and his friends are going to spend some time with me this summer. And I was thinking of all the places I can take them, and I can imagine taking them to McClellan Ranch Park to see the Science Museum, to go swimming, to go walking in the woodlands. And there's a wonderful park ranger there. I think his name is Franklin. But I cannot imagine taking my grandson and his friends to Blackberry Farm because they don't have any equipment, and I have no idea where to get equipment. So, I think for those people who already enjoy golf, I can understand why they want to keep the golf course. But as someone said, it's an expensive sport. It's a rich man sport. someone invited me to join Saratoga Golf Club many years ago, and I still don't think I will ever start golfing. I'm 80 now, so, but I do appreciate the opportunities that are available in Cupertino, and I don't see myself as including golf as part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley, for that comment and sharing. I will go ahead and call on one more person for a live question, and we will also go ahead and publish the last few comments, and if there are any questions in the Q&A chat in that time, so that you can read those if you would like. So for our last question, John, you are at the top of my list, so you can go ahead and ask your question.
So my question is, why were you using the 2018 and before data? Golf has had a huge resurgence during COVID, and the data should be available from 19, 20, and 21. We should be looking at those numbers. And it's my understanding, and I can't remember who in the park I talked to, but that the golf course has been more than breaking even during this time.
I can answer that one, Lisa. We left out the COVID years of golf, we call them the last 2 years, because we believe it's an anomaly for the sport at Blackberry Farm. We have averaged 28,000 rounds typically before that. And in COVID, we are averaging 40,000 rounds, which is similar to what other golf courses have seen an upsurge because golf was the only sport that people could participate in. It would be great if we kept that amount of players. We're not really counting on it, though. We don't really know yet what's going to happen. I mean, when Tiger Woods came on the scene, Blackberry shot way up to almost 80,000 rounds. So there's no way, we're obviously nowhere near that now. So there's no way to know how long this is going to last. And 40,000 rounds does not make the golf course self-sustaining.
Thank you, Jenny. And thank you for that question. I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping us up here as it's almost 8 p.m. So first of all, we'd like to just thank everyone again for attending this meeting, learning more about the project and the future use options, and then sharing your questions and comments and thoughts during this Q&A session. Again, if you haven't already, please go take the community survey on the Engage Cupertino website and share it with your other Cupertino friends, family, and neighbors. And then, we know that we weren't able to get to all the raised hands, and you all had a lot of really great questions. So if your question wasn't answered or you'd like to share more, again, please just follow up using the Engage Cupertino website, either by taking the survey and sharing your thoughts and questions there, or by emailing city staff, whose contact information is included on the website. With that, thank you so much for being here, and we hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thank you, everybody.